President Biden is on a trip to the West Coast and has already spent part of the day in Northern California. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Carlo Cicchetto.
I'm Marcella Lee. Tonight, it's Southern California's turn. The president is here to lend support to Governor Gavin Newsom, who is facing that recall election tomorrow.
Our political reporter, Morgan Reiner, is live in Long Beach, where the president is scheduled to arrive in the next half hour. Morgan?
President Biden's visit coming at the 11th hour. By this point, an expert told me that people already know who they're going to vote for. And if they don't, 24 hours out before this election ends, well, that expert told me then people are simply not going to vote. But this event, this big event where the president is scheduled to speak any minute now, that expert told me is more for the media to keep covering this recall in an exciting manner 24 hours out. But the man leading on the other side, conservative talk show host Larry Elder, spoke to me today one-on-one, and he told me excited is what he is. He told me he plans on bringing home the win tomorrow night. Stop one in Northern California.
We can't afford to let anything slip further.
President Biden meeting with fire officials.
In less than a month, has wiped out for 200,000 acres and 1,000 structures.
Surveying the Calder fire damage.
Homes, precious memories destroyed, air quality degraded, local economy stopped in its tracks, and nearly 200 people in the area forced to live in shelters.
Stop 2, Long Beach. Biden expected here any minute to campaign on behalf of Governor Newsom.
Whether it's Joe Biden, who I understand is here today, no one has uttered the following words: Gavin Newsom has done a good job.
Something conservative talk show host Larry Elder said will not help Newsom.
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling strong. I think the energy is there.
Confident, despite the polls, that he is going to bring home the win Tuesday night.
I think polls are shifty. Depends on how they sample them. I think they oversample Democrats.
He would not directly answer whether or not he will accept the results of this election if he loses.
And I think all of us should have an interest in making sure that we have voter integrity, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're an independent, whether you're a Republican. So I would ask my opponent to let's all make sure that the voting was fair and proper.
Secretary of State Dr. Shirley Weber posted on social media today saying that this recall is being handled with the utmost care and it's completely open to the public. You can hear we have some people already up on stage speaking. The president hasn't landed just quite yet. We expect he'll start speaking sometime around 7, but of course I'll keep you updated on that part.
And Morgan, what are we expecting the president to talk about in this? Gavin Newsom, the state, what's the focus?
Well, this is the first big election where how a governor handled the pandemic is going to be on the ballot. And Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign, they did not shy away from his record. They ran towards it. So we can expect the president to talk about how Governor Gavin Newsom handled the pandemic along with other national issues. That's exactly what Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign wants. They want to make this a national issue. And Carlo, just a few minutes ago, I wrapped up talking with Newsom's campaign, and they were asked, in a state like California that's so heavily Democratic, how do we get to this point 24 hours out from a recall? And they said it's simply because in California how easy the process is. They said a ham sandwich could qualify.
Quite a reference. All right, we'll see. 24 hours or so away, 26 hours, those polls close. Morgan Reiner, our political reporter, thank you very much.
And many San Diegans have already voted by mail in this recall election. Others will vote on Election Day at one of the county's 131 ballot drop-off locations.
Poll workers are standing by for those who want to vote in person. And as News 8's Allison Royal reports, the Registrar of Voters is ramping up efforts ahead of tomorrow.
About 70% of eligible voters here in San Diego County are expected to vote in this recall election. But the Registrar of Voters wants to make sure that everybody who's interested has the opportunity to go out and say, I voted.
It's almost like a Super Bowl Sunday for the Registrar of Voters. The California recall election is finally here, the state's first since 2003.
Our small but mighty staff of 69 permanent employees grows to nearly 3,000 employees. So we hire on more staff in the office to process ballots, to assist voters.
One by one, San Diegans arrived at the Registrar of Voters on Monday, ballot in hand.
Even in this simple election with what appears to be such a simple two-part ballot, there's still nearly 10,000 variations of that ballot. When you look at the unique precinct each voter is coming from, as well as across 5 different languages.
One of those voters is Ellie of Serra Mesa.
It took about 5 minutes. I went in there, and I actually came in with my ballot to vote old school. My wife and daughter, I dropped their ballots off.
So, what's the most commonly asked question this election?
Can I vote on both parts of this ballot?
According to Interim Registrar of Voters Cynthia Paz, the answer to that is simple. It is completely up to each voter. They can vote on one or both of those questions, but that's their call. Staff members also want to make sure it's easy for San Diegans with disabilities to vote. They offer curbside voting for people who have difficulty getting out of their cars, as well as drive-through ballot drop-off. There are also ballot marking devices.
These will allow an individual who is visually impaired or blind to listen to an audio ballot. They could black out the touch screen, and they could use a handheld controller with large arrows or braille to mark their ballot.
And those ballot marking devices are available at each of the county's 221 polling locations. I'm Allison Royal for News 8.
After 2 days of deliberation, a jury reached verdicts late this afternoon in the trial of the man charged with murdering San Diego police officer Jonathan de Guzman.
News 8's Jesse Pagan is live downtown with what the jury found and what's next in this case. Jesse?
Carlo, Marcella, after weeks of trial, we now have that verdict. It came down just this afternoon. The jury finding Jesse Michael Gomez guilty on 2 main counts here. The first being first-degree murder for the shooting and killing of Officer J.D. de Guzman, and the second for attempted murder for the shooting and hurting of his partner, Officer Wade Irwin. Now, this verdict comes after weeks of trial. Since mid-August, the jurors and the judge have been listening to prosecutors making their case. They argued Gomez and another man saw the officers and started shooting when they approached him and asked if he lived in that area. This all happening back in Shelltown in 2016. Now, Gomez testified in his own defense during this trial. They argued Gomez didn't know they were officers, instead saying he thought they were gang members. Now, that argument didn't convince the jury, which dropped a guilty verdict to gasps in the courtroom this afternoon.
We, the jury, above entitled cause, find the defendant, Jesse Michael Gomez, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree. Please. The murder of Jonathan de Guzman was committed by the defendant, Jesse Michael Gomez, and that Jonathan de Guzman was a peace officer who was intentionally killed while engaged in the performance of his duties.
Now, the jury also found Gomez guilty on a 3rd count, which was a felon carrying a firearm. Now, because we're talking about 2 San Diego police officers who were the victims in this case, there is a special legal circumstance. That means that we now go into another phase of this trial where the jurors will have to come back and actually deliberate the actual sentence and then deliver that, whatever it is that Gomez will receive. In this particular case, Gomez could be facing the death penalty or life in prison without parole. The judge today says he expects the jurors to not talk about this case to anyone, not talk to the media, or watch any kind of coverage or read any kind of news stories between now and when he expects them back in court, which will be Thursday morning, to go through that sentencing. Carlo, Marcella.
Thank you, Jesse. A man from Oceanside was arrested in Washington, D.C. today after Capitol Police found weapons in his vehicle.
According to investigators, 44-year-old Donald Craighead told officers that he was on patrol and began talking about white supremacist ideology.
News 8's Steve Price has more on what we're learning about Craighead's past.
Donald Craighead is no stranger to our county's court system. Over the past 5.5 years, he's been arrested several times. And before living here, he was in Montana, where he also got in trouble with the law. Well, now he's been arrested again, this time in Washington, D.C.
U.S. Capitol Police say this truck belongs to Oceanside resident Donald Craighead. Inside, they found a bayonet and a machete. Both are illegal in D.C. He was arrested Monday morning outside the Democratic Party headquarters on Capitol Hill after officers were tipped off about a suspicious vehicle. Craighead's truck had a picture of an American flag in place of a license plate and a swastika and other white supremacist symbols painted on it. It's not clear why Craighead was in the nation's capital, but a rally to support those arrested for storming the Capitol on January 6th is scheduled for Saturday. It's believed that hundreds of people, including members of far-right extremist groups, are planning to attend. Members of Congress met with Capitol Police this morning to get an update on their plans.
They gave us a good briefing. They're handling this in a very professional, thorough way, and I think they're much better prepared than things were before January 6th.
Facebook quickly took Craighead's page down after his arrest, but we found another one under his alias Jonathan Swade, where several pictures are publicly shared. News 8 also learned that Craighead is no stranger to law enforcement, having been arrested several times here in San Diego County, including just last year for everything from possession of methamphetamine to brandishing a weapon. And at the time, he was on probation for an earlier robbery conviction. Court documents show there is currently a warrant out for Craighead's arrest for apparently failing to show up for a sentencing hearing.
Craighead is charged with possession of prohibited weapons, which is typically a misdemeanor, but because he already has a felony conviction, he could face felony charges in this case, and if convicted, that could mean up to 10 years in prison. At the downtown courthouse, Steve Price, News 8.
Pretty disturbing. Thanks, Steve. Still ahead. Security is already on high alert in Washington, D.C., and tonight, ahead of this weekend's rally.
And on the heels of Ida, the Gulf Coast braces for yet another storm.
Our forecast for today brought sunshine, also some warm temperatures, but we're going to start to cool down throughout the week, talking about low clouds and fog and also some high surf.